let your shoulders drop. Tonight, we journeyed back slowly, gently into a world lit by candlelight and clouded with wood. You are entering a medieval city, not the majestic one from fairy tales, but the one that really was bustling, cramped, and layered in time. This is not a tale of knights and dragons. It is a quiet immersion into daily life, distant lives, and forgotten rhythms. With each segment, we'll move softly through cobbled alleys, dusty libraries, strange rituals, and hidden halls. The past will unfold like a page of parchment, its edges curling, its ink. Allow each moment to arrive slowly and drift into sleep as we uncover the quieter truths of history. A gentle closing, and now, dear listener, we leave the city behind. The cobbled streets fade, the candle gutters out, the night becomes still. History is not only battles and kings, it is the silence between bells, the sound of a spoon in a wooden bowl, the warmth of another body in a shared bed on a cold night. These lives, though long gone, still echo softly. As you rest now, remember, your breath, your thoughts, your dreams, they, too, are history in motion. Let that thought comfort you. You are safe. You are warm. You are home. Good night. Why you wouldn't last a day in a medieval city by midday. The marketplace grows crowded. Stalls made of old planks and patched cloth offer wilted vegetables, secondhand tools, and rough-spun wool. The air is a swirl of smells, turnips, tallow candles, and the sharp temps of sour ale. You pass a tooth puller shouting over the clatter, his rusty instruments displayed like silverware. A woman sells dried herbs, bundled in linen. A boy chases a goose through muddy legs. Coins clink softly. Not gold, not silver, but lead tokens or bits of copper rubbed smooth from use. Every purchase requires haggling. Every sale, a negotiation. A local friar preaches to a quiet crowd. He speaks of sin and salvation, his voice gentle but persistent. You pause, not for the sermon, but for the stillness, the hush it creates in a city that rarely pops. Then the crowd disperses, and the noise returns. Your stomach aches, not from illness, just from emptiness. The bread was thin today, stretched with barley and old rye. You chew slowly, so it lasts. You cross under an archway into a narrow side alley. A cat naps on a windowsill. A child sings to herself while playing with a bundle of rags. And you see a bucket outside a door. A reminder not to drink from that well again. Evening creeps in early, as it always does. When buildings lean so tightly, the sun disappears behind clay rooftops and smoke begins curling from low chimneys. You pass a blacksmith's shop. The hiss of water on metal, the rhythmic clang like a slow heartbeat. And then the bell again. Not for church, but for curfew. The town must close. Doors shut. Windows latched. Fires dampened. You make your way home, stepping carefully on worn stones, past doorways carved with charms, and a wooden crucifix at a corner shrine. Inside, your room is no warmer than the street, but it is yours. You settle onto your straw mattress, feeling the brittle rustle beneath your body. You listen, not for danger, but for routine. Footsteps above, a cough, a baby fussing, the gentle patter of rain starting on the roof. You pull your wool blanket tighter and breathe in the smoke-scented air. And somehow, in this ordinary discomfort, you begin to understand. They lived like this every day. Quietly, resiliently, with no idea of what the future would become or how we would remember them. And now, with your eyes heavy, let that day pass behind you. As they let theirs, how the Mongols erased the Golden Age. Imagine now that you are no longer in Europe, but much farther east. In the 13th century, walking slowly beneath the elegant arches of Baghdad, once the brightest jewel of the Islamic world. The streets are lined with date. The call to prayer echoes softly across tiled domes. This is the House of Wisdom, or it was. A library, a laboratory, a gathering of minds. But the sky is darkening. The Mongols are coming. For now, the city breathes quietly. The Tigris River glimmers. You pass markets fragrant with cardamom and lamb stew. Children run past in linen robes, their laughter mixing with the chatter of scholars. Baghdad is a center of learning. Astronomers, physicians, philosophers all gather in this city to exchange ideas. From Greek texts translated into Arabic, to newly written treatises on optics, algebra, medicine, paper mills work endlessly. The scent of ink fills the air. Now imagine standing inside the House of Wisdom. Shelves tower above you. Scrolls, books, tablets, some bound in leather, others resting loosely, fragile with age. The room is hushed. The silence is not empty. It hums with thought. Candles flicker gently. A scholar leans over a chart of stars, tracing lines with a reed pen. Another murmurs quietly, copying a passage from Galen into Arabic. Knowledge is sacred. It is preserved by hand, word by word. But the walls are not strong enough to stop what's coming. It is 1258. The Mongol army surrounds the city. The siege begins. Siege means waiting. Slowly, heavily. You hear no cannon, No bombs. Only silence. Then fire. Then screams. Then water rising red with ink and blood. The libraries are burned, or worse, drowned. The Mongols cast manuscripts into the Tigris River. The ink bleeds out, turning the water black. Legend says the river ran dark for days, clogged with the words of a lost civilization. Whether true or myth, the image remains. A quiet kind of horror. You would not last a day in this city either. But some remained. Some fled, some memorized what they could. One student wrapped a single book in linen, hid it beneath his robes, and walked 1,000 miles east. And so the knowledge did not vanish. Not completely, not forever. But the House of Wisdom is gone, and the city sleeps under ashes. The desert wind blows gently across the ruins. Now breathe. You move quietly now through the broken gates of the once great city. The Mongols did not just conquer, they dismantled, stone by stone. Before the invasion, Baghdad had stood as a beacon of culture and science. The Abbasid Caliphate ruled here, not with brute force alone, but through scholarship. Baghdad was not merely a city. It was a living archive, a place where paper was as valuable as gold. Imagine walking the narrow corridors of the Souk al-Kutab, the bookseller's market. Scrolls bundled with ribbon, pages fluttering in the soft breeze of a woven fan. A bookseller with inky fingers, proudly reciting the names of authors from India, Greece, Persia. You pause before a manuscript with golden calligraphy, tracing the curves of letters you do not yet understand. The city held more than books. There were observatories, grand buildings open to the stars, instruments of brass and polished wood, aligned to track Jupiter's slow journey across the sky. You picture a young woman, her head covered in soft cloth, sketching the moon's phases into a wax tablet. She is one of many quiet thinkers whose names did not survive the fire. There were hospitals, bimristans, filled with quiet voices and strong herbal scents. Doctors there did not simply treat symptoms. They observed, recorded, debated. The works of Hippocrates were studied, but so were new theories of contagion. The body, like the cosmos, was believed to obey order and reason. Now, those rooms are gone. The Mongols took the bridges first. They offered terms. The Caliph refused. What followed was not just a siege, but an unraveling. It said that the Mongols used prisoners as human shields, that libraries were used as stables, that for days the city burned and bled and screamed. Then fell completely silent. No census survives. We do not know how many perished, but it is not only people who die in war. Ideas die too. And yet, even here, even now, there are remnants. Years later, in distant Samarkand, a trader opens a trunk. Inside, a single-bound volume, pages still intact. A fragment of Baghdad's lost wisdom. Quietly, it changes hands. Kopade translated, read, carried westward. Some say that without Baghdad, the European Renaissance would never have bloomed, that the light passed through darkness, across languages and centuries, surviving on scraps. So the House of Wisdom still echoes. In every page of calculus, in every chart of the heavens, in every prescription that understands the body as system, not punishment. A city may burn, but thought of shelter can drift like smoke. Now, the river runs clear again. Night has fallen fully. You rest beneath a linen canopy, the stars above unmoved, and slowly, gently, we move on. The mystery of the dancing plague. Imagine now a quiet town in the Holy Roman Empire. Strasbourg, summer of 1580. The cobbled streets shimmer with heat. The bells have rung for morning prayers, and most are already at work. Bakers knead dough with heavy hands. Blacksmiths sweat by the forge. The usual rhythm of life, steady and familiar. And then, a sound, a soft tapping, a heel against stone. At first, it seems harmless, even joyful. A woman dancing. Alone, her name is Frau Traffi. She dances in the square without music, without laughter, without pause. Her face is tight with something more strained than joy. Not celebration, but compulsion. You stand in the shadow of a doorway and watch her. An hour passes, then two. She dances through the heat of the day, her arms jerking like marionette strings, her eyes unfocused. By nightfall, a crowd is formed. Murmured prayers, nervous gestures. Some say she is possessed. Others believe her touched by the saints, or by madness. But then, more join her. Dozens, men, women, young apprentices, a widow, a monk. Within days, they number over 400. No instruments play, there is no feast, no wedding, no harvest to celebrate. And yet, the dancing does not stop. Their bodies are slick with sweat, feet blistered, some collapse, some rise again. What was it? Even now, no one can say for certain. One theory is ergot, a mold that grows on rye, known to cause hallucinations. But ergot usually leads to twitching, not dancing. Others suspect hysteria, a mass psychogenic illness, born of hunger, stress, and fear. Strasbourg had suffered poor harvests. Disease lingered in memory. Perhaps the dancing was a release, or a plea. Still, others wonder if it was something spiritual, a ritual, an expression too old for words, the body speaking what the mind could not bear. Imagine how the town must have felt. The fear of the clergy, the helplessness of physicians. Doctors prescribed more dancing. Believing it, the only cure. A stage was built, musicians were hired. The dancers were led in procession to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, protector against affliction. Some recovered, others did not. The chronicles say many died. Of exhaustion, of heart failure, of something that lived only in the rhythm of their limbs. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the dancing stopped. The town returned to silence. The square was swept. The shrine's candles went out. And still, no one truly knew what had taken hold of them. Now, centuries later, you walk quietly through Strasbourg's modern streets. Cars pass where carts once rolled. The square still exists. Empty now, paved over. Ordinary. But if you pause, truly pause, and close your eyes, you might still hear the echo of bare feet against stone, a heartbeat too fast, a breath caught between ecstasy and terror. History is full of riddles. This was one of them, and as your thoughts soften, as the rhythm fades, we step slowly, gently into the next and final chapter of the night. As the days wore on, the spectacle drew curious eyes from neighboring towns. Merchants passing through paused their carts to stare. Children climbed to upper windows, watching with wide, unblinking eyes as adults moved in endless rhythm, feet shuffling against the cobblestones, some sobbing, some silent. Their clothing hung loose, with sweat, stained and torn. Some danced alone, others in mirrored motion, as if bound by an invisible choreography. Imagine yourself now, standing just beyond the crowd. You feel a strange pull. Not fear, not wonder, just a heaviness in the air. Something unspoken, yet pressing. You smell sweat, incense, and the earthy sourness of damp linen. A woman falls to her knees, body trembling. A young man pulls her back up, not in kindness, but because stopping might bring punishment. They believe this is penance, that this is divine. In town squares and church halls, whispers grow louder. Is it the wrath of Saint Vitus? A curse? Were they bewitched? Local priests perform exorcisms. Scholars consult old texts. City leaders, desperate to end the plague without understanding it, order more music, more dancing. A strange remedy, born not of science, but of ritual. Like treating a burn with fire, you walk behind a row of dancers now. Quietly, one woman's hair is plastered to her forehead. A boy no older than 12 shuffles with bleeding feet. He doesn't cry, he just moves. Eyes glaze, lips mouthing a silent prayer. Or a song only he hears. The records faded and fragmented. Speak of deaths, though never in detail. The number varies. Some say 15, others 50, others still hundreds, but numbers matter less than moments. One account speaks of a man dancing until his heart simply stopped. A stillness amid the frenzy. There are reports of similar outbreaks elsewhere. In Aachen, in Cologne, even as far as the Netherlands and Italy. Never explained. Never fully repeated. Some historians now believe this may have been collective trauma, leaking through the skin and muscle. Sorrow turned into motion. Europe had lived through plagues, famines, and endless war. Perhaps the body remembered what words could not express. You sit now on a wooden bench outside an old chapel. A breeze passes, lifting a curl of dust from the road. You imagine that if you close your eyes long enough, you might hear them again. Those strange footfalls in rhythm, not music. Or maybe it was grief, made visible. Maybe it was a kind of prayer. Maybe it was simply the mind's soft unraveling beneath too much weight. Whatever it was, it left quietly, like mist. And the town folded its memory away, stitched between pages of old ledgers and sermons. Even now, in Strasbourg's archives, you might find a letter, a witness, a scribbled plea, but no certainty. History, after all, is full of gaps. And it is in those quiet gaps that sleep waits. Let us move gently now, away from the dust of the square, towards something richer, grander. A hall of stone and silver. Feasting in a castle while peasants starved. Now, the air changes. The stench of the alley fades. The crowded city retreats behind a curtain of stone. You are crossing the drawbridge of a medieval castle. Slow steps, overworn planks, beneath towers trimmed with banners. It is quiet here, softer. The sounds of the city seem distant now, like echoes in a dream. Inside, candlelight flickers against walls of carved stone. Tapestries hang heavy with woven hunts and saints. Servants move in, practiced silence. The scent of roasted meat, cloves, and freshly baked bread weaves through the halls. Thick and strange after the lean smells of the town. You are here as an observer, not a guest. A ghost in this place of privilege. In the great hall, the table gleams beneath polished silver and goblets of pewter. A boar's head, its eyes glazed and open, is crowned with herbs. Trays of candied fruits glisten. Eel pies rest in fluted pastry. The wine is dark, almost black, poured from heavy jugs by boys no older than 12. The Lord sits at the high table, robed in velvet. Rings catch the light. His wife, a lady draped in ermine, lifts a spoon carved from bone. They do not speak of hunger. They speak of falconry, of a new bishop, of a son, but somewhere, far beneath their boots, the same people who built these walls are bearing children too small to name. A lute plays softly in the background. A dog naps beside the hearth, its coat brushed smooth. The Lord does not notice the girl who refills his cup. She has not eaten today. Imagine her. Hands chapped hair, tightly braided beneath a linen cap. She serves while others feast, moving like water through the stone corridors. She sleeps beside the scullery door, where the heat of the ovens lingers longest. Down in the kitchens, fire roars. Cooks shout over steam and smoke. One slices onions with a dull knife. Another stirs a copper pot thick with gravy. A third drops a loaf of bread and, after looking around, hides it beneath her apron. Not to steal, to survive. This meal, elaborate and beautiful, took 3 days to prepare. Geese plucked and stuffed. Pigs turned on a spit. Ale brewed weeks before. The peasantry, just beyond the walls, ate broth with cabbage. If they were lucky, the divide was not just wealth, it was reality. Those in the castle believed themselves chosen. By God, by birth, by blood. Poverty was not misfortune, it was destiny. The stars said so. The priests confirmed it. It was written into law and prayer. Yet even here, death finds a place. The castle has its own chapel. Beneath the altar lie bones. Plague does not spare velvet. War does not respect gold. The feast ends with laughter and crumbs. The Lord toasts to his ancestors. The lady sighs, dabbing her lips with cloth. You watch as the hall empties. Plates scraped, candles snuffed, benches creaking under the weight of tired bodies. And still, in the corner, a servant gathers what is left. A crust of bread, a bone with meat still clinging. She pockets them. Again, not to steal, to share. Outside, the wind whistles through arrow slits. The moon casts its glow over the courtyard. Somewhere in the stables, a boy hums softly to himself as he beds down in straw. The horses, even, are fed better than many. And in this moment, still, hushed. You understand something? The castle is not just walls and wealth. It is silence. The silence of those not allowed to speak. The silence of hunger muffled by feasts. The silence that echoes even now. Let this silence carry you. Let it soften your breath and dim your thoughts. And as the hall darkens, as the embers fall into ash, we prepare to leave this place and return gently to our own time. The Lord and his guests have moved to a side chamber, smaller but no less ornate. Here, under a painted ceiling and iron candelabra, they drink spiced wine from delicate glass. There is laughter now, low and easy. A troubadour strums, a stringed instrument shaped like a pear, singing softly in a language few beyond this room can understand. A falcon perches nearby, hooded and still. It has not hunted today, but it will tomorrow. Not for food, but for pleasure. You drift through the shadows behind the stone columns. You notice the glow of skin flushed with wine, a jeweled brooch glinting in the firelight, the soft rustle of velvet and brocade. You notice to the servants, always present, always silent, refilling cups, clearing crumbs, stoking the fire, slipping away before being seen. Some of these young attendants were taken from village homes in early childhood. Others were born here in service. Most will never leave the castle walls. Their stories will go unrecorded. Their names, unremembered. Bala, in the cellar, Barris lined the damp walls. A boy no older than 10 rolls one forward. It sloshes with cider. He wipes his hands on his tunic, worn at the cuffs, and glances toward a window. Outside, the moon glows silver over the tree. A fox slips through the snow-dusted orchard, silent as breath. Upstairs again, dessert is served. A rare pleasure. Honeyed almonds custard, thickened with eggs. A marchpane shaped like a castle, painted with edible gold. Laughter ripples through the air like warm bathwater. The steward smiles, watching it all. Not because he shares in the feast, but because he orchestrated it. His joy is in its perfection. But again, the thought returns. The other world beyond these walls. Just across the river, a woman gives birth in a drafty room lined with rushes and prayers. Her midwife boils water over a fire fed with splinters. There is no doctor, no midwife's license, only hands worn by time and belief. That child will never taste custard. It may not live to see the spring thaw. In this contrast lies the quiet weight of medieval life. Not just the hardship of the poor, but the way their hunger built, the tables of the rich, the grain tax, the eggs gathered, the hands calloused and unseen. You shift now and imagine yourself as one of the scribes. Perhaps you sit near the fire in the Lord's solar, copying Latin texts with careful ink strokes. You see these banquets not as guest or servant, but recorder. You write the names, you note the dishes, you sketch the shape of a new goblet or the embroidery on a sleeve. Your job is not to question, only to observe, only to remember. And you do. You remember the way the laughter soft as the hour grew late. You'll remember the servant girl with the quick eyes. You remember the wine stain that bloomed unnoticed on the table linen. And you remember, faintly, the sound of a bell outside. Not from the castle, but from the city gate. A curfew bell, a reminder that beyond the walls, night belongs to the poor, to the wind, to hunger. But here, the fire remains warm. The bed is layered with wool. The night concludes with a prayer and a yawn. Let that comfort settle over you now. Not because it was fair, but because it is over. The fire dims, the feast has ended, and the castle falls into hush. Let that hush become your own. Whenever you're ready, say conclude, and I will guide you into the final segment. A gentle reflection that will ease you into sleep. A gentle closing, and now, dear listener, we leave the city behind. The cobbled streets fade, the candle gutters out, the night becomes still. History is not only battles and kings, it is the silence between bells, the sound of a spoon in a wooden bowl, the warmth of another body in a shared bed on a cold night. These lives, though long gone, still echo softly. As you rest now, remember, your breath, your thoughts, your dreams, they, too, are history in motion. Let that thought comfort you. You are safe. You are warm. You are home. Good night. Settle in. Let the weight of the day soften and drift away. Tonight, we travel back slowly, gently into the misted fjords of the north, past the crashing waves and icy winds, into longhouses lit by oil lamps, into silence broken only by the slow clink of iron and the creak of wooden oars. This is not the Viking saga of fearless warriors and golden treasure. It is a quieter story, a story of forgotten lives, of those whose names were never carved into stones, of the ones who built the ships, ground the flour, and slept beside the animals. As always, this journey is told in 4 parts. For slow currents in the river of the past, we begin with the lowest rung, the enslaved. Then, we meet a king whose ambition burned through continents. Later, we descend beneath the earth to the buried longships and their ghostly treasures. And at last, we return to the hearths of the fjords, to glimpse the women who shaped the daily rhythm of Viking life. So, close your eyes if you wish, let your breath slow, and begin to imagine what it was really like to be a Viking slave. Imagine you are taken from your home, not by choice, not by voice, but by force. You don't speak the language, you don't know the gods. You are simply now, a thrall. The Norse word for slave was rila word, heavy with silence. With shame, it meant property. It meant a life, not your own. No voice in law, no right to family, no protection beyond your master's will. You are young, maybe 12, maybe younger. You were taken during a raid, or born to an enslaved mother, meaning your fate was sealed the moment you cried out. You rise before dawn. The longhouse is still dark. Its air is thick with the scent of smoke, fur, and damp straw. You sleep near the livestock. Warmth is warmth. The roof is low. The floor packed earth. You do not own the clothes you wear. Each day begins the same. Feed the animals. Haul water from the stream. Grind grain with the heavy quern, stone back bent, arms aching. Fetch wood for the hearth. Careful not to drop it. Careful not to be slow. There is always someone watching. Always a voice calling, reminding you of your place. Your meals are plain, porridge, sometimes dried fish. If meat is served, you wait until others eat first. You are given the bone. And when guests come, you disappear. Or you serve. You speak only when spoken to. You never meet their eyes. The winters are long. Your fingers crack and bleed from cold. The fire is for others. You may sit close only when everyone else has gone to sleep. Some thralls work in the fields, others inside. You may be a weaver, or a stable boy, or a child nurse to a baby who will grow up free while you grow old in service. And if you anger your master, or if you're simply unlucky, you may be beaten, or sold, or killed. There is no court, no record. You are an object, like the clay pot or the ox. And yet, you live. You learn the language. You know the names of the stars and how to read the sea mist. You sing quietly to yourself. Songs from before. Songs no one else here knows. Some thralls are manumitted freed after years of service. But even then, their children may remain enslaved. Or they may be forced to live where no one forgets what they once were. You hear the warriors talk of gods, of fate, of Valhalla. But there is no Valhalla for you. Only work. Only cold. Only the rhythm of days that all feel the same. When you sleep, you dream. You'll remember your mother's face. The scent of wild garlic in spring. And in those dreams, for a while, you are not a thrall. You are simply Sometimes, when no one is looking, you pause to feel the breeze through the wooden slats of the longhouse wall. It carries a scent of pine resin, salt from the sea, and distant cooking fires. You imagine what it would feel like to walk freely through the woods again, to fish at your own pace, to speak without fear. But day after day, the rhythm repeats. You learn to move silently, quickly, efficiently. You anticipate commands before they're spoken. You know which tools to fetch, which children cry at night, and how to patch a roof with rushes. You'll become invisible, not because no one sees you, but because that's safer. Sometimes, at the fire, the older thralls whisper stories. They speak of home, of hills and languages you've never heard. They remember different gods, gods with gentler eyes. They say that in some lands, no man can own another. They whisper too of rebellion, but only in the softest tones. A spilled cup, a loosened latchmaw resistances that no one notices, but that let them feel human again. You learn that, sometimes, surviving quietly is a kind of defiance. And the seasons turn. In summer, you sweat beneath the sun, turning soil with wooden plows, the mud sucking at your feet. In winter, you carry bundles of firewood across icy paths, your breath fogging the air, your toes numb, your body shaking. You witness births, deaths, you bury fellow thralls in unmarked graves. Sometimes, not even that. Just a mound near the trees. No ceremony, no stones, just a return to the soil. But you also witness moments of peace. The hush of early morning, the slow trickle of snowmold, the hush of reindeer moving through distant woods, the lullabies of a mother also, a thrall humming her child to sleep while she kneads barley dough in her lap. Your world is one of repetition, but also of quiet knowledge. You know when the salmon run? When the herbs bloom, how to tighten rope and mend a cracked bowl with pitch and patience. You hold the memory of tasks no one bothers to teach their children anymore, because they have you. You know your master's moods, the way he frowns when worried, the way his voice slurs after mead, the way his son looks at you not with hate, but with indifference, which sometimes feels worse. And yet, there are moments, small ones, a rare gift of food, a kind glance, a child's hand slipping into yours, unafraid, and still, you dream. Not of vengeance or conquest, but of stillness, of a life where you do not wake in fear, where your name belongs to you, because even when your body is owned, your thoughts remain yours, quiet, flickering, like the flame of a way-loyal lamp in the dark. And that is how you survive, not by force, nor by war cries, but through silence, memory, endurance. Let us now leave the smoky walls of the longhouse behind. Let the chains of that life fall gently away, as we move toward the story of a very different Viking one who sought to rule, not serve, Harald Hardrada, the forgotten last Viking king. Let us now step away from the flickering hearths and the toil of the enslaved, and turn instead to the long, frozen shadow of a man born to rule. His name was Harald. History remembers him as Harald Hardrada, a name that echoed like iron in the north. But before he was a king, before he was feared, he was a younger brother, exiled, wounded, and far from home. Imagine yourself as him now, a boy of nobility in Norway, the younger half-brother of a king, Olaf II, the saintly, the bold. You grow up hearing stories of battle and destiny, always from behind your brother's shadow. Then comes the day of reckoning. In 1030, you fight beside him at the Battle of... You are just 15. Steel crashes on... The earth is churned with hooves and blood. You watch your brother fall, you are struck and left for dead. But you survive, hidden, broken, alone. And so begins the long wandering. You flee east to Kiev and Rus, where you serve Prince Yaroslav, learn foreign tongues, and begin to command respect not just for your noble blood, but for your cunning. The winds of exile carry you further, all the way to the golden walls of Byzantium. There, you become a commander in the Varangian Guard, a foreign elite unit sworn to protect the Emperor of Constantinople. And so, a Viking prince becomes a soldier of the East. You fight pirates in the Aegean, rebels in Sicily, and Saracens in the Holy Land. It is said you plundered cities, brought back gold, and perhaps even entered Jerusalem itself. Barefoot, in reverence, you write songs about these things. Harsh, short stanzas about fire and conquest. Always in the third person, always with a cool detachment. And yet, even in your triumphs, you are still not home. Years pass, you grow into a man of power. Not loud power, but something colder, calculated, shaped by loss and distance. Finally, you return to Norway with wealth, allies, and a claim to the throne. But Norway is not waiting for you with open arms. You take it by force. Harald becomes king in 1046. He is not the first Viking king, nor the last in name, but he is the last in spirit. A man who lived in the twilight between the Old Norse world and a rising Christian Europe. He taxes harshly. He centralizes rule. He builds churches, not out of piety, but out of necessity. He sponsors poets, listens to sagas, but mistrusts flattery. He is both patron of the arts and a warlord, and in 1066, when he is over 50 years old, gray-haired, but still proud, he sails again to England. He believes it should be his. A tangled web of inheritance and broken promises brings him to the shores of Yorkshire with hundreds of ships. His men are fearless. His banner, the Lancaster, flies high above the fields. They win at first, a fierce battle but then, just days later, at Stamford Bridge, everything ends. King Harold Godwinson of England marches north with lightning speed. The Viking army is caught unarmored. Resting, there is fierce resistance. One Norse warrior, perhaps a berserker, holds the bridge alone, killing dozens before he is taken down. But it's not enough. Harold is struck by an arrow, it is said, in the throat. He dies, standing, sword in hand. The Viking Age, many historians say, ends there, not with fire and pillage, but with the quiet fall of its last true king. And yet, Harold Hardrada never truly vanishes. His bones may lie in a monastery far from where he dreamed, but his legacy lingers in sagas, in whispered tales, in the shape of how kings would rule after him, more calculated, more European, less wild. Now, let us leave the battlefield. Let the banners fall. The steel cools. The wind moves through the empty and we move deeper still, from kings and conquest into something stranger, something older, and more mysterious. Though history often remembers kings in the glow of battle or on the pages of treaties, Harold's life was shaped more by silence than by shouting. Silence aboard ships, crossing distant waters. Silence in cold, candlelit halls. Silence in exile. In waiting, after the loss at Stiklestad and the death of his brother Olaf, Harold's escape from Norway was not the end of his youth, but the beginning of his becoming. And as he wandered eastward, toward Kiev and Rus, he carried with him not just grief, but the weight of expectation. He was a man of noble blood, with no land, no crown, and no people. In Kiev, under Prince Yaroslav, Harold found purpose. The prince gave him status and shelter, and for a time, Harold served as captain of his personal guard. He became fluent in courtly customs, in Eastern languages, and in the rules of trade, diplomacy, and intrigue. But Harold was not content with peace alone. Even here, he planned patiently, persistently for his eventual return to Norway. Then came the Byzantine years. Harold's arrival in Constantinople was not as a beggar, but as a commander. He joined the Varangian Guardian elite, unit composed mostly of Norsemen and Anglo-Saxons. These warriors were known not for their pageantry, but for their loyalty and brutality. Harold would rise swiftly through their ranks. It is said that Harold led campaigns along the coasts of Sicily, across the rivers of Bulgaria, and even into Jerusalem. His poetic verses composed, in the Norse tradition, speak of cities taken, treasures hoarded, and flames licking palace walls. Yet the poems are oddly restrained, short, measured as if each word were a step through snow. He served 3 emperors, and during one succession crisis, he may have been imprisoned, accused of withholding tribute, or perhaps he simply became too powerful. In any case, Harold escaped. Legend claims, with a daring leap from the palace walls, aided by a secret lover or an ally from within. It is hard to say where the truth ends and the saga begins. Eventually, he returned to Kiev with vast treasure, gold, silks, weapons, icons, but more importantly, with influence. He married Princess Elisif, daughter of Yaroslav, further cementing his claim as a prince of the north, and then after nearly 15 years in exile, he sailed back to Norway. There, the land had changed. Magnus the Good, son of the fallen Olav, now ruled as king, a youth of promise and popularity. But Harold, older and seasoned, was not deterred. He demanded his share of the kingdom. At first, it nearly led to civil war, but the two men struck an uneasy agreement sharing the crown. It lasted only a few years. Magnus died suddenly in 1047, and Harold became sole ruler of Norway. Now, king at last, Harold ruled with a mixture of rigid control and strategic generosity. He strengthened the monarchy. He enforced coinage. He built churches, yes, but he also suppressed revolts. His hand was firm. He brooked no dissent, and he never forgot Denmark. Though he failed to conquer it fully, Harold spent years launching campaigns along its coasts, always returning, always testing the wind. But his eyes, eventually, turned to England. When Edward the Confessor died in 1066, the succession crisis that followed drew Harold in like a storm. He believed he had a claim tenuous, perhaps, but real enough in an age of oaths and inheritance. With an army of thousands and hundreds of ships, he crossed the North Sea once more. The invasion of England was swift. At Fulford near York, Harold's forces crushed the defenders. He demanded hostages, but before he could regroup, Harold Godwinson, newly crowned King of England. At Stamford Bridge, the two armies met. Accounts say Harold was unarmored when the attack began, expecting only negotiations. He fought anyway, wielding a massive two-handed sword. His presence was commanding even at 51. He stood tall, broad-shouldered, with a great beard and piercing eyes. But no Valar could turn the tide. An arrow perhaps fired from behind English line struck him in the throat. He died instantly. Of the hundreds of ships he brought to England, only a handful returned. His dream ended not with coronation, but with silence on a field now soaked in early autumn mist. And yet, it is not a story of failure. Harold Hardrada lived not one life, but many. Exile, mercenary, lover, poet, general, emperor's guard, king. He was the last Viking not just by time, but in spirit. His death marked more than the end of an age. It marked a turning in the north. From sagas to scribes, from raiding to ruling, from firelight to candlelight. Now, the embers of his saga dim, and we move from the restless sea to what lies beneath the earth. When you are ready, let us turn gently toward segment 3, the buried longships of Oseberg and Gokstad, where ancient wood sleeps beneath the soil, and memory clings to every carved beam. The soil in Norway is not known for mercy. It freezes, it shifts, and in the lowlands near the fjords, it clings to the things buried beneath it, shielding them from time. Imagine yourself walking through a quiet pasture. The grass sways in the wind. Sheep graze lazily nearby, but the ground beneath you hums with hidden grandeur. Mounds rise gently from the earth. Not quite hills, not quite natural. These are the resting places of ships. Real ships, covered with soil, sealed with clay, and filled with the belongings of the dead. It is the early 1900s, and farmers near the village of Oseberg begin to dig. What they uncover is unlike anything seen before. The Oseberg ship, resting beneath a burial mound since around 834 CE, is nearly intact, over 70 feet long. Its sleek curves and tall prow still whisper of the sea. Carved from oak, the ship's prow ends in a spiraled dragon's head, stylized, elegant, coiled like a question mark. Not just a vessel of war or trade, this was a ship of ceremony and of farewell. Inside, archaeologists find the remains of two women. One, older, the other younger. The older woman is dressed with care, her bones laid in a wooden bed, surrounded by precious items. Silk from the east, spindles and looms, imported bronze buckets, carved wooden carts, and richly embroidered tapestries. The grave is unlike any other. Scholars debate still. Was she a queen? A priestess? A seer? There is no gold here, no weapons, and yet, the impression is unmistakable. Power? Imagine now the day of her burial. The ship dragged across land on log rollers. Villagers standing in silence. The creak of ropes. The chance of a body placed aboard, surrounded by her life story, rendered in artifacts. And then the ship, slowly entombed beneath earth, sealed to sail into the next world. The grave also held the skeletons of animals. 12 horses, 8 dogs, 2 oxen, and even a peacock, suggesting not just wealth, but symbolic importance. A journey required companions, in both myth and ritual. The Gokstad ship, uncovered a few decades earlier, in 1880, offers a different picture. Slightly longer, broader, and designed for speed. This ship likely served a warrior or chief. Within it, the bones of a man aged around 40, with signs of battle wounds, cut marks on his legs, possibly fatal. He was buried with his shield, a game board, cooking gear, and a sled. No name was written. No saga directly links to him, and yet, he rests in state. These ships are more than graves. They are biographies in wood. They tell us that death, in the Viking world, was not the end, but a voyage, and the vessel mattered. The craftsmanship is breathtaking. Every nail is every plank curved with precision. No iron keel, no engine, and yet these ships once crossed open seas, reaching as far as Iceland, Greenland, even North America. In museums now, the ships rest again. Carefully reconstructed, suspended in silence, tourists whisper in awe. Dust motes drift in the beams of filtered light. But back then, they sailed under full canvas, creaking and groaning with the wind. And more graves lie undisturbed. Across Scandinavia, sonar scans and quiet archaeological digs hint at dozens more burial mounds. Some hidden beneath roads or farms, others too fragile to touch. Each may contain a story, a person, a journey. One such ship, discovered in recent years near the village of Gillestad, lies just beneath the plow line of a farmer's field. Ground-penetrating radar revealed its outline, nearly 65 feet long, untouched, waiting. There's something comforting in knowing the dead once sailed on real wood, not into legend, but into land. Buried not to be forgotten, but to be remembered in silence. And now, from ships beneath the earth, we rise gently and turn our gaze inland, into the dim warmth of a wooden hall, where light flickers on woven cloaks and the hearth is never allowed to go cold. Not all Viking graves were ships, but ship graves those were for the honor, the sacred, the remembered. In Norse belief, the ship wasn't just transportation. It was a symbol of passage between worlds, between breath and silence. between the cold fjord wind and the misted halls of the afterlife. And so the burial ship became both coffin and cathedral, a vessel to carry the soul across an unseen sea. You can imagine the ritual's months of preparation, the carving of planks, the gathering of goods, the careful placement of the deceased amid the things that defined their life, each object chosen with intent. A comb, a cloak pin, a sword. In the Oseberg burial, even the carts had wheels carved, like suns turning, not just through soil, but through meaning. Wood was never plain. It held stories. Snakes, beasts, tendrils of myth wound their way along beams and posts. Each surface invited touch. Each curl of the carving hinted at forgotten prayers. And even today, scholars don't agree on who the Oseberg women were. One theory suggests a Velvasir, a woman who wielded symbols and song. Valvas were feared and revered, said to speak with spirits and see beyond time. If so, the burial items, herbs, a wand, even a bucket of apples become more than goods. They become talismans, tokens of a deeper knowledge. Another theory argues nobility. Perhaps a queen mother, a widow of a powerful or even the co-ruler of a small region. Her presence would have commanded obedience, and her death required spectacle, but we do not know her name. There's a gentle tragedy in that. A tomb so rich, so carefully built, yet her story is lost to sagas that chose other heroes. And then, the Gokstad man, buried with different honors. His ship had fewer carvings, but more practical strength. Wide and seaworthy. His legs, 4 wounds, perhaps from battle. His shield lay nearby. His possessions suggested travel. Coins from abroad, exotic silk thread. He may have sailed far before being brought home, in death, for one final voyage inland. Even in the land of the living, ships were sacred. Children played with miniature longships in streams. Traders painted ships on their house walls. Skald Snorre's poets sang of ships that flew like dragons across the foam. At sea, the crew lived tightly, packed shoulder to shoulder, eating cold fish, wrapped in damp wool. They rowed under the call of a drum, with sails furled, their backs aching. These same men may have stood silent at a ship burial, heads back. To stand at the site of Oseberg today is to feel stillness. The reconstructed ship rests on a polished platform. It no longer moves, but it remembers. Visitors speak softly. Children pause. There is something profound about its lines, its narrow beam, its wide ribs, its curling prow. The ship speaks of loss and pride, of journeys begun and never finished. Even the iron rivets, rusted but intact, seem to hold breath. Across Scandinavia, burial mounds still rise. Some grassy, some stony, many untouched. The sea air lingers nearby. Lichen clings to stone. Birch leaves whisper overhead, and we do not know who lies within. That is the mystery that soothes more than it haunts, because in that unanswered silence, we find room to rest, to imagine, to sleep. And so, let us leave the buried ships tucked beneath their grassy blanket sand. Follow the winding trails inland. There, between mountain and sea, stand longhouses, low, warm, and flickering with firelight. The women of the fjords. Life inside a Viking longhouse. The wind softens now. You are no longer near the shore. The sea is distant, replaced by the creak of pine trees and the steady crackle of a heart. Imagine yourself inside a Viking longhouse, low-roofed, warm, and full of scent. Smoke curls upwards, slipping through the smoke hole in the ceiling. A single flame flickers in a carved oil lamp. The world here is made of wool and wood, clay and care. And at the heart of it all, you find the women. The sagas speak often of warriors, of axes and kings, of blood and conquest. But most lives were quiet. Most lives were not spent in raids, but in rhythms, and most of those rhythms were maintained by women. You hear them before you see them. The steady thump of a loom weight, the whisper of wool being carded, the gentle singing of a lullaby, nearly lost beneath the hiss of stew on the hearthstone. The longhouse was not merely a place to sleep. It was a domain, and in many ways, a woman's realm. The lady of the house held the keys to its chests, its storerooms, its authority. She oversaw the servants, rationed the food, tended the medicines, and governed daily life. Her key ring was worn at her belt, a symbol of control, not just utility. The work was unending but not unskilled. Cheese had to be cultured in the right air. Wool dyed with careful mixtures of bark and lichen. Bread baked on hot stones, turned by hand. Animals tended, children watched. Fires fed, always fed. Evenings were spent spinning. Not just thread, but stories. Oral tradition lived here, not in written runes, but in remembered tales told softly in the orange light. A girl might learn her mother's herbs by touch. Juniper for the chest, yarrow for bleeding, angelica for fever. These were not idle curiosities. They were tools of survival. The difference between health and hunger often lay in hands like hers. And women could own land. They could divorce. They could demand the return of a dowry. They served as witnesses and sometimes fought in battles. But more often, they fought with memory. remembering debts, lines of kinship, family promises made and broken. In the spring, they planted flax. In the autumn, they smoked fish and stored grain in sealskin sacks. Each season was another turn of the wheel, another verse in the poem of a life. And while the men might boast of voyages to Dublin, to Micklegard, it was the women who ensured there was still a home to return to. The longhouse smelled of smoke and wool, of salted meat and fermented fish. A cradle sat by the fire, rocked slowly by a foot while hands never stopped weaving. Chickens scratched at the threshold. Rain pattered on turf roofing. Wind hummed through chinks in the wood. At night, all slept together. Family, guests, servants, laid along the benches, bundled in furs. A dog stirred. A child whispered in sleep. And the woman of the house, her fingers still rough with wool, might lie awake, planning the next day's bread. These were the lives not carved in runestones, but lived out in silence. No saga sings of their labor, but their memory lingers. In the grooves of spindle whorls, the smooth wear of wooden spoons, the faint blue dye that still clings to scraps of ancient linen. Their world was not one of glory. It was one of warmth, of work, and of endless care. And as the fire dies low, and the wind picks up again outside the walls, you feel it. The rhythm of their days, the hush of their strengths, the quiet legacy of those who endure. Now, let us lie back. The warmth inside the longhouse lingers, not only from the hearth, but from the rhythm of bodies moving with purpose. In this shared space, life unfolds in layers. The shuffle of fur boots across earth-packed floors, the hiss of water poured over grain, the soft murmur of children being taught, not from books, but by doing. The women of the longhouse rarely rested. Their hands were always in motion, not out of haste, but necessity and tradition. Each gesture was inherited, thread passed from mother to daughter like an heirloom, bread made from sourdough starters, carried across generations. The wool they spun clothed the entire family, and sometimes the whole village. When ships were repaired for spring raiding, women stitched the sails. They crafted them from thick wool soaked in animal, fat and fish oil. Waterproof, heavy, strong, these sails carried the fame of Viking men across oceans. But they began here, in the low light of the long, between careful, calloused fingers. Even jewelry, often thought of as decoration, was deeply practical. Bronze brooches didn't just adorn, they fastened layers of linen and wool, allowing for ease of movement during hard labor. A woman's dress was a record of her skill. The neatness of her seams, the richness of her dyes, the durability of her stitching. And the longhouse was not merely a shelter. It was a calendar, a storeroom, a cradle for memory. Dried herbs hung from beams. Barrels of mead fermented in corners. Above the rafters, onions braided in ropes. Beneath benches, birch bark baskets filled with stories, too, were stored here. Imagine one evening, a woman sitting by the hearth with her children gathered close. She tells them of a whale that washed ashore when she was young, how the entire village survived on its meat through the winter, or of her grandmother, who once defied the local chieftain by hiding stolen grain during a famine. These were not just tales, they were warnings, lessons, blueprints for survival. Women also conducted rituals. When a child was born, it was often the vulva, a wise woman, part healer, part mystic, who performed the rites. She would trace protective symbols in ash whisper charms passed down from the age of gods. When someone died, it was women who washed the body, laid it out, sang the morning songs. Grief, too, was their labor, and if danger approached, a rival clan, a sickness, a wolf spotted near the goats, it was the women who decided what to pack, who to warn, what to save first. Life in the fjords was shaped not by battles, but not by plunder, but by preparation, and it was women who ensured that each generation learned how to endure. In the quiet of winter, when the sea froze over and the snow crept up to the longhouse walls, the world outside slowed to a hush. Inside, life contracted. The nights were long. By the fire, hands continued to spin and mend, cook and tend, always making, always mending. Even dreams were practical. In sleep, women envisioned the next planting season, the wool that needed dyeing, the dowry gifts that must be prepared. Time passed slowly, not in great leaps, but in stitches and spoons. And so when we think of the Viking world, the carved prows, the thunder of feet on distant shores, we must also think of the quiet strength in these halls. The memory keepers, the hearth watchers, the weavers of both cloth and kin. They built no monuments, but they built everything else. Now, let the flicker of their fire settle in your mind. Let the scent of dried thyme and smoked meat linger faintly in your thoughts. Listen to the low breath of the wind against the longhouse walls. And when you're ready, we'll close our journey with a final reflection in the conclusion. Soft, steady, and peaceful. Just let me know. Sleep beneath the northern stars now. The hearth has cooled. The wool has been folded. The long ship sails no more. The voices of slaves, kings, seers, and mothers all drift into silence. Only the soft rhythm of history remains, like waves, lapping at the edge of memory. Yvette journeyed across the many faces of Viking life. Not just the gleam of axes or the roar of raids, but the quieter truths behind them. The calloused hands of the enslaved, the weary feet of kings, the ships that still sleep beneath the earth, and the steady, unheralded labor of those who kept the fires burning. And through it all, there has been a pattern, a rhythm, steady and unbroken. From the tightening of a wool cord to the tolling of a ship's bell, from the hush of a burial to the laughter in a smoky hall, history breathes, even now, faint and slow beneath the surface. Outside, the night stretches across the stars hang heavy and still. And here, in the quiet, you are far from the noise of now. There is no need to do anything more. Let your thoughts settle like frost on a thatched roof. Let the stories soften into dreams. The journey is over. You may sleep. Good night. Settle in. Let the weight of the day drift gently away. Your eyes may close, or they may not. There is no need to do anything but listen. Tonight, we journey to a time of whispers and candles, a time of iron keys, parchment scrolls, and long corridors lined with silence. This is late medieval Europe, a world where faith shaped every corner of life, and fear lingered just beyond the firelight. In this world, belief could protect you, or undo you. Ideas had weight, and words could turn into accusations. The flicker of a candle could mean prayer, or interrogation, but this is not a tale of drama. Not tonight. This is a slow unraveling of forgotten truths. The hidden spaces where power met piety, where quiet footsteps echoed through cloisters and courtrooms, where everyday people lived quietly under the shadow of something greater, and far more watching. Across 4 gentle segments, we'll explore this shadowy time. You'll walk beside the accused, sit with a scientist beneath judgment, browse a forbidden shelf of books, and end your night behind the thick walls of a stone monastery. Each step will be slow, the tone soft, and as the hours pass, sleep may arrive like dusk, settling across old stone. What it was really like to be questioned by the Inquisition. Imagine this. It is late autumn, the air is cool, and the walls of your village chapel sweat with damp. Somewhere, a bell tolls, low and far away. You live in a town that is small, unimportant. But even here, the Inquisition has arrived, not with swords or torches, but parchment and robes. You are summoned by a messenger, a man in wool and leather, who offers no reason, only a time and a name. The Inquisitor. You do not sleep well that night, nor the next. You try to remember everything you said, every time you argued with your neighbor, every time you skipped a fast day, every word uttered too quickly, or in anger, or perhaps just differently. When the day comes, you wear your best tunic. You walk quietly behind the messenger, through a town that does not meet your eyes. The building is plain. Stone, a converted priory, perhaps. The door creaks. Inside, a hallway stretches. The walls are whitewashed, but stained. A single candle is lit, though the sun is up. The air smells of wax and ink. You are led to a wooden bench, left to sit. There is no shouting, no guard, only silence. And then, eventually, a door opens. The Inquisitor is not frightening in appearance. He wears the same robe as any friar. His eyes are calm, but his voice is practiced, neither cruel nor kind. It is designed to sound like truth. He reads from a scroll. The words are careful. You have been accused, not condemned, but you must answer. You do not know who accused you. You will not be told. Perhaps someone overheard a jest about relics. Perhaps you were seen visiting a healer, or said something about indulgences after too much wine. He asks you to speak plainly. You do. He asks again. Later, the same question, worded slightly differently. You are not beaten. You are not imprisoned. Not yet. But there is a weight in the room, a sense that the wrong answer will change your life. You are allowed to leave. For now, told to return the next day. Outside, the town feels different. You nod to a friend. He does not nod back. The next day, the questions deepen. You are asked to name others. You are asked about books, about dreams, about what you think in your heart when you hear the Mass. You are not tortured, because you are still not condemned. But you are weary. You forget what you've said. You doubt your own memory. At night, you imagine the worst. You've heard stories of chains, of cells too narrow to lie down, of men who confessed to crimes they did not commit, just to make the questions stop. You still hope you will be spared. On the 3rd day, you are told that your case will be reviewed, that your cooperation has been noted, that God sees your honesty. You are dismissed, but not cleared. Your name is kept in a ledger, a copy sent to the Archbishop, another, perhaps, to Rome. You return to your village, but people remember. Even your family speaks more quietly now. For years, you wonder if your name will be summoned again, because in this world, accusation never fully fades. But life must continue. You return to your stall in the market. You attend Mass, you light candles, and you never speak certain thoughts aloud again, because you remember the quiet room, the waiting bench, the ink-stained fingers, and the voice that asks you gently, "Are you sure that is what you believe?" You begin to change in small ways. When you pass the chapel, you bow lower than before. You repeat the words of the creed with more clarity, more certainty, even if your mind begins to wander. At night, you no longer speak of saints or visions. You keep your prayers to yourself. Even your dreams, you hold tight, unsure of what might be misheard or misunderstood. Your children grow up watching your caution. They notice how you hesitate before answering simple questions, how you frown when they ask why the church door is always locked at dusk, and the Inquisition, though it fades from town for a time, leaves something behind. Not smoke or scars, but stillness, a hush in the markets, a reluctance to laugh too loudly, because sometimes laughter is the first thing they ask about. Imagine now, months later, you are walking to the well with your neighbor. The sky is overcast. You speak of nothing unusual, the harvest, the price of grain, but then she mentions a dream she had, of a glowing woman who told her not to fear death. You nod politely. You say nothing more, because you know that visions, even innocent ones, can be dangerous. Later, you wonder if you should tell someone. To protect yourself, that's the trick of it. Fear reshapes memory. It sharpens the need to be blameless. And over time, whole villages become quiet. The Inquisition does not need to return every year. It only needs to come once. Imagine, too, a traveling friar, arriving weeks later. He's not connected to the Inquisition, not officially. He preaches in the square. His sermon is fiery but eloquent. About heresy, about fire and brimstone, about souls lost to arrogance and doubt. No one speaks during the sermon. No one moves. Afterward, you notice people are more devout for a time. The baker wears a larger cross. Children are corrected more sternly for skipping prayers. And beneath it all, that same hush, the careful listening, the inner weighing of words. You remember those 3 days you spent being questioned? How nothing hurt, exactly, but how everything shifted. And how now, even when the Inquisition is gone, you still hear its voice when you speak. Not aloud, but in your mind. Are you sure that is what you believe? And you answer, always. Yes, even when you don't know anymore. The silent trial of Galileo, the room is cold. Not by accident, but by design. The walls are thick stone. The windows are high and barred. This is not a prison, not quite. It is a tribunal chamber. But it feels just as silent, just as airless. You are Galileo, Galilea scholar, a stargazer, an old man. Now, your fingers shake when you hold the quill. Your knees ache when you kneel. Your mind, though, it is still sharp. Too sharp, perhaps? It was not always like this. Once, you were the pride of Florence. You built telescopes better than any in Europe. You watched Jupiter and saw its moon stands. You looked at Venus and saw its phases. You dared to say, the Earth is not still. It moves, it orbits the sun. But the stars, beautiful and silent, do not speak in favor of power. And your words, published and bound, traveled farther than your telescope's gaze. Now, here you are. In Rome 1633, you've been called to answer for what you wrote. Not for violence, not for heresy, exactly. Not at first, but for the vehement suspicion of heresy, for teaching a truth that the church has not sanctioned, for making others believe the earth itself moves, not the heavens. You are led into the room. 3 judges sit beneath a crucifix. Their faces are unreadable. Robed Sevilla, you are told to kneel. You do. The bones in your knees protest. There is no crowd, no public trial. The world will not hear what is said here. They ask you to recant, not to unknow what you know, but to say the words, to admit that the earth does not move, to write it down. Clearly, humbly, you hesitate. Your telescope has shown you the truth, but truth is not enough. It never is. They remind you of Bruno, burned in the Campo de Fiori years ago. He said too much. He would not bow. You are old. You are tired. You are not Bruno. You'll sign the paper. You are placed under house arrest, not prison. You return to your villa in Archetri. You are watched. Your books are censored. Your visitors are few. But your mind continues. You write in secret. You turn your gaze inward. Your daughter, Maria Celeste, writes you kind letters from the convent, full of prayers, full of love. Her words are soft where the churches were hard. She dies before you. You grow blind. The stars you once saw so clearly now live only in memory. And yet, the earth still moves. You never said it aloud, not in that cold room, but perhaps you whispered it. Later, alone, when the night was still. E per si muove, and yet it moves. History is silent on whether you said it, but the silence is often more powerful than the words. Now, let that silence continue, and drift with it. We leave Galileo here, in his villa, his eyes closed, the sky turning above, and now, we'll step back further in time, down into the pages of parchment and ink, toward a different kind of silence. The silence of books, never read, but the tribunal was only part of the story. In truth, your trial began long before you stepped into that cold Roman chamber. Years earlier, you had already been warned. In 1616, Cardinal Bellarmine Sharp, respected, and cautious, advised you to speak only of Copernicus's model as a hypothesis, not fact. A useful fiction, perhaps, not a truth. You agreed, outwardly, but ideas have weight. You continued to write, and with each turn of the pen, you pulled the heavens a little closer to earth. Your great work, dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, was carefully framed as a conversation. Three men, debating politely. One of them, Simplicio, defends the old view, the earth at the center. The others gently dismantle him. You thought it would be enough to cloak truth in dialogue. But Simplicio's name caused whispers. Some said he resembled the Pope. Others said your writing was too bold, too mocking, too clever by half. Your old friends in Rome turned cold, and when the tides turned, they turned fully. The Pope, who once admired you, now questioned your loyalty. The congregation of the Index reconsidered your work. The Inquisition prepared its case. You are not tortured. That is important, but you are threatened. Persuasively, repeatedly. The message is clear: obedience or oblivion. Your recantation is public. Your guilt is published, and the Church records its victory. Carefully, permanently. Still, your name survives. And in time, so do your ideas. At home again, beneath the hills of Tuscany, your world becomes smaller. Your daughters write you letters. Soft words on coarse paper. You respond slowly. The ink stains your fingers more than before. You take comfort in small things. The sound of the fountain, the feel of sunlight on your hands, the memory of Jupiter's moons arcing across a black sky. You dictate new studies. On motion, on falling bodies, on pendulums. You can no longer see the stars, but your mind continues to trace their paths. Eventually, even that quiet light dims, and centuries pass. In 1992, more than 350 years after your trial, the Church acknowledges its error. An official apology, words spoken before a modern audience. But it is a quiet correction, not a reversal. You were not there to hear it. Still, the world moves, and your name, Galileo, moves with it, across textbooks, telescopes, and time. Let us close the door on this chapter now. Let the trial fade into the stillness. And let us now descend again, this time into libraries that once held your books in secret, where pages whispered, ideas no one dared speak aloud. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Church's list of forbidden books now. Imagine yourself not in a grand courtroom or a candlelit monastery, but in a quiet study, behind a closed wooden door. Somewhere in Italy, perhaps in Venice, or Rome, or Florence, it is late. The candle is burning low. A breeze from the shutters carries the scent of ink, old paper, and the distant sea. Before you lies a book, leather-bound, spine cracked, its pages filled with neat Latin script and careful margin notes. It is not a dangerous book. Not obviously. It speaks of planets, or language, or philosophy, but its presence is forbidden. Its words lie on the wrong side of a line, drawn by unseen hands. And so, you read in silence, in stillness, knowing that if footsteps were to echo down your street, you would have little time to hide it. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the index of forbidden books, was not a single document, but a living list. It changed, as ideas changed, expanding, contracting, reforming, a catalog of heresy, curiosity, and control. It began officially in 1559 under Pope Paul IV, but its roots stretch further back through whispers of heretics, through accusations of corruption, through a church anxious to hold a world growing wider, faster, and more literate than ever before. At first, the index listed the usual suspects: Luther, Calvin, early reformers whose words challenged not just theology, but the very authority of the church itself. Then came philosophers: Erasmus, Descartes, Spinoza, and scientists, to Copernicus, Kepler, and yes, Galileo. Books were not judged only for what they said, but also for how they said it. A tone to bold, a premise to independent, a suggestion that truth might live outside the church. Some books were banned outright. Others required correction. Still, others were restricted, only to those with permission, those trusted with dangerous thoughts. You might imagine these books burned, but often they were not. Instead, they were locked away in church vaults, monastery shelves, and the hidden collections of scholars who could not bear to destroy what they loved. Sometimes, the forbidden texts were copied by hand, passed quietly between friends, margins filled with notes, sentences circled, underlined, erased, and restored again. There was risk in reading, but also reverence. You see, not every reader of forbidden books was a rebel. Some were faithful, devout, they believed in the church, but also believed that the world was wide and that the truth could stand questioning. Others read in search of loopholes, contradictions, curious about what had been hidden. Still others read to remember, to preserve what might be lost. Imagine a scholar in Prague, crouched beneath the beams of his attic, a single volume on his lap, his eyes flicking over the lines. He knows the book is banned, but it is a gift, his father's. He reads not in rebellion, but in remembrance. Or imagine a nun in she has found an old botanical text, forbidden because its author suggested that the body was a machine, not a miracle. She reads slowly. She copies recipes for healing herbs onto scraps of linen, storing them behind the brickwork of her cell. And then there were the printers. Cautious, clever, they carved tiny letters into wood and metal, risking not only their livelihood, but sometimes their lives. A misplaced copy could mean arrest. A successful press run might spread ideas across a continent. By the 17th century, the index contained thousands of titles. Some entire authors were banned. Other entries were oddly specific. Page numbers, editions, publication dates. An entire bureaucracy emerged to evaluate, censor, correct. And always, behind it all, was the same question. Who gets to decide what may be known? In time, the index lost its force. The Enlightenment moved faster than the church could erase. By 1966, it was officially abolished. But its echo remains, even now, in quiet rooms. The memory lingers of books that could not be read, of truths too fragile or too powerful to share. And in a sense, the forbidden books never disappeared. They simply changed hands, found new shelves, waited in silence. Tonight, as you rest, imagine a library lined with them. Volumes that were once outlawed, now sitting calmly in rows, dusty but intact. Their titles no longer whispered, but spoken aloud. You may not open them tonight, but you can feel their presence. Soft, steady, waiting. Let us leave that library now. The candle has burned low. The sea wind has grown cold. Let us move instead to a monastery, high in the hills, where silence was not a punishment, but a way of life. A rhythm of obedience, of humility, of bread and bells. And so, the list grew. Not in fury or haste, but slowly, methodically, generation by generation. Scribes with quills and ink-catalog titles line by line. Some copied by candlelight, in thick-bound ledgers resting atop wooden pulpits. The index was not simply a tool of repression. It was also, in its own way, an archive of fear. A reflection of what the church found dangerous. Not swords or soldiers, but words, arguments, ideas. There is something tender about that. That fragile power of language. The quiet influence of pages and paragraphs. To be placed on the index was a strange kind of recognition. It meant someone had read you, had judged your thoughts strong enough to matter. It meant your book, whether scientific or poetic or satirical, had stirred something. For those who were literate, a rare privilege, the act of reading became both sacred and subversive. The pages of a forbidden book were not merely text. They were terrain to navigate carefully, slowly, as if each word might wake a sleeping guard. In Spain, under the Inquisition, the index was enforced with special intensity. Households were sometimes visited, shelves inspected, private libraries burned. Some readers, knowing what they possessed, learned to hollow out wooden beams and hide scrolls inside. Others pressed thin manuscripts between layers of cloth, sewing them into cloaks or under. A few wrote out entire treatises by hand, copying them carefully into innocent-looking ledgers, baking recipes, prayer books, merchant records. The forbidden text nestled quietly between lines of flour and honey. In universities, professors learned to speak in circles. They might say, one theory, which of course we reject, suggests, and then present the banned idea, wrapped in disclaimers, shadows, and caution. Censorship shaped not just what was said, but how it was said. Writers became skilled in metaphor. The natural world became allegory. The stars were symbols. Philosophy, fiction, and astronomy blurred. Copernicus was not allowed to speak plainly, but his diagrams told their own story. Imagine now a quiet scholar in Paris. Perhaps in the year 1620, he has just received a parcel, wrapped in oilskin and sealed with wax. Inside, a book, written in Dutch, translated from Italian, printed in Geneva. Its cover is blank. The spine is unmarked, but he knows what it is. He lights a second candle, pulls the curtains closed, and begins to read. Some books remained on the index for centuries. Others were removed and later restored. The list was not static. It responded to politics, to wars, to reformations and counter-reformation. Occasionally, a work was banned, not for its content, but for its author, because the writer had fallen out of favor, or converted, or challenged the wrong bishop. In other cases, the opposite happened. A book full of questionable ideas was tolerated because its author had powerful friends, cardinals, kings, or wealthy patrons who could vouch for his orthodoxy. So the index was not only about theology, it was about control, reputation, and influence. It was a mirror to the age. The last official edition of the index was published in 1948. Nearly 4,000 titles, a record of centuries of caution, and then silence. In 1966, after 400 years, the index was officially suppressed. Not because danger had vanished, but because the church had changed. The world had changed. The flood of information could no longer be held back by a list. But the idea of forbidden knowledge did not disappear. Even now, you may feel it. The quiet thrill of the unknown, the reverence of secrets, the soft rustle of a book once hidden. Let that idea rest beside you, gentle and still. And now, let us leave the study. The candle has burned low, the window shutters creak. Ahead lies a different kind of silence. Not one of secrecy, but of devotion. Let us step into the stone walls of a monastery, where bells mark every hour, and life follows a rhythm older than memory. A place where words are few, but meaning lingers. Life in a Spanish monastery, obedience, silence, and bread. Now, the world narrows. Stone walls rise around you. The sound of wind fades into thick silence, interrupted only by the slow toll of a distant bell. You are in a Spanish monastery, a place not of punishment, but of peace. A world removed from the clamor of cities, the fear of tribunals, the danger of open thought. Here, life is pared down to its essence. Stone, light, breath. Imagine yourself waking just before dawn. The cold touches your skin before you open your eyes. Your bed is nothing more than a wooden frame with a straw-stuffed sack. Your robe is wool coarse, but warm. Your feet find sandals, worn smooth by years of pacing. The same corridors. There is no alarm. No voice calls you. But you rise, because this is what the rule dictates. The rule of Saint Benedict, or another monastic order, has shaped every hour of your day. Centuries of obedience distilled into ritual. Matins is the first prayer, offered in darkness. The chapel glows with faint candlelight. Voices rise not in conversation, but in chant. Soft, steady, Latin echoing through vaulted ceilings. You do not sing to be heard. You sing to align yourself with something older, greater. After prayers, there is work. Some tend the gardens. Rows of onions, leeks, lentils, others bake bread. The flour measured precisely, the dough kneaded with practiced hands. In the scriptorium, scribes bend over vellum, copying ancient texts, each letter drawn with care. Each margin measured, silence is expected. In many orders, speaking is reserved for designated times, and only for necessity. A monk may go days, even weeks, without speaking aloud. But this is not a silence of punishment. It is a silence of intention. Gesture takes the place of words. A bowed head means thanks. A raised hand, a request, a small nod is approval. Communication becomes gentle, thoughtful, and in that quiet, the mind begins to still. Meals are taken in a refectory. Long wooden tables, stone floors, simple benches. The meal is bread, a bowl of lentil stew. Sometimes cheese, sometimes wine. A brother reads aloud from scripture or the lives of saints, while others eat their spoons, scraping gently on clay bowls. There is no laughter, no idle talk, no clatter. Only the soft rhythm of communal life. The library is the soul of the monastery. Hundreds of books bound in leather, fastened with clasps, written in ink, made from oak galls and iron. Some are religious texts. Others are classical works, preserved through the centuries by monks who understood their worth, even when the outside world did not. You may spend your hours copying text, watering herbs, feeding chickens, tending the sick, or preparing parchment. Each task is done slowly, reverently. The rhythm is steady. The days blend into one another, but that sameness brings comfort. Seasons pass, the vines grow heavy with grapes, then bare again. The chapel grows colder in winter, and the candles flicker shorter, faster. In summer, the scent of rosemary and olive trees drifts through open cloisters, and through it all, the bells toll, 7 times a day, and once in the night. Lauds, prime, terce, sextinun, vespers, not alarms, not commands, but gentle reminders. This is the hour to pause, to pray, to listen. There is little contact with the world beyond the monastery walls. News arrives slowly, if at all, but the brothers know the rhythm of the sun, the shape of each season, and the sound of each other's footsteps in the hall. Occasionally, a traveler or noble visits, seeking wisdom or refuge. A sick child is brought to the infirmary. A student asks to study under the abbot. These moments are rare and held quietly. Death comes without fanfare. A candle is placed at the foot of the bed. Prayers are whispered. And the next day, the brother's place in the chapel is simply empty as work taken up by another. There is no rush, no spectacle, no reward other than peace. The monastery endures, not because of ambition, but because of rhythm. Like waves, like breath. And now, As the sun sinks behind the hills, the final bell sounds. The monks file silently into the chapel once more. The air is cooler now. The sky deepens to indigo. You return to your cell. Light a candle, open a worn book, and in that small flickering light, you feel something not quite explainable, a kind of stillness that hums beneath the silence. Let your breath slow, let your thoughts quiet. And now, we conclude. By now, you've settled into the rhythm. Each moment in the monastery flows into the next, not rushed, not resisted. It's a place where time feels circular, returning, repeating, not linear. Your fingers now move without thought as you copy the daily psalms. The steady scraping of quill on parchment blending with the subtle rustle of robes. The ink smells faintly metallic, tinged with vinegar and oak. It stains your fingertips, and no one minds. Stained hands are marks of devotion. Outside, the cloister garden thrives within its stone walls. Rows of herbs, sage, thyme, lavender, tended carefully. Not for ornament, but for medicine. There is no pharmacy here, only memory and practice. You crush dried leaves into poultices, infuse them into oils. A salve for aching joints, a balm for fever. You've learned it all from the older brother with the weathered hands and the deep, patient voice. The bells guide everything. Their tolling is gentle, but insistent, like the monastery's heartbeat. You grow attuned to their intervals. You know when Vespers approaches, even without looking at the sky? You can feel it. The rule orders the day. But within that order, there is room for contemplation. You sweep the hall slowly, letting your thoughts float without urgency. Sometimes, you notice the smallest things, sunlight catching motes of dust in a window beam, the way the ancient flagstones are worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, or the warmth of a cat curled in the nave, undisturbed by prayers. In the colder months, the brothers gather closer for warmth, shoulders nearly touching in the chapel. They shared silence. In summer, doors stay open, and the hum of bees and birdsong drift in with the breeze. Monastic life is not without hardship. Fasting days are frequent. Sometimes, the bread is hard, the wine sour, the cold seeping into your bones. But no one complains. The suffering is not a punishment, it is a discipline, meant to pare away distraction. You begin to recognize faces by their stillness. A nod from Brother Mateo at the oven means the bread is ready. A glance from the infirmarian means a patient has worsened. A pause before the abbot speaks means something important is about to be said. Your own voice, once so frequent in the world beyond, has grown softer. When you speak now, it is with intention. Every word chosen, like a stone placed in a garden. And when you don't speak, you do not feel absence. You feel space. Peace, in this world, comes not from having nothing to do, but from doing each thing slowly, fully. There are no clocks, only bells. No ambition, only purpose. No noise, only prayer and birdsong. And when a feast day comes, it feels like sunrise. The brothers sing louder. The bread is warm with honey. The wine flows more freely. A procession moves through the cloister in robes of deep color. Candles held high, incense swirling in the open air. The relic of a saint is brought out, not for superstition, but for remembrance. You walk slowly behind the others, and you feel it. Not joy, exactly, not pride, but something gentle. A quiet gratitude that this day, like all others, was lived in full. And as twilight returns, and the feast ends, and the final candle is pinched out, you lie in your cell, wrapped in your robe, the stone floor just beneath your bed. You'll say nothing. You listen. A bird calls once outside the window, and then only silence. The kind of silence that echoes. The kind that welcomes sleep. The kind that has no need for ending. Conclusion now, the candles are nearly gone. Their wax has run slow, rivers down bronze holders. Their flames, once firm, flicker low with every breath of air, until one by one, they vanish. And with them, the long shadows of the day slip into darkness. We have wandered far tonight, through heavy doors and hushed chambers, past whispered fears and silenced truths, through trial and prayer, through ink and ash, through lives bound by obedience or branded by belief. We stood in the stone corridor where questions were asked not to be answered, but to be endured. We watched the heavens with Galileo and wondered how silence could echo louder than speech. We turned the brittle pages of forbidden books and saw the edges of ideas scorched by fear. And we walked slowly, steadily through the monastery halls, where time was not measured in minutes, but in bells, in bread, in breath. Each moment tonight, though distant in years, is not so far from us. There is a quiet sameness in their rhythms, waking, working, hoping, enduring. And now, as your eyes grow heavier and the world around you softens, let the stories recede gently. Let the past fade into fog and parchment. Let the burdens carried by others, long ago, settle like dust upon a shelf still, undisturbed. Here, in this quiet, you are safe. The flames are out, the doors are closed, the questions have stopped. There is only stillness now, and sleep. Good night. Settle in. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tension drift from your hands, your jaw, your brow. Tonight, we march backward through time, not in haste, not in triumph, but slowly, steadily, step by step into the era of brass buttons, powdered wigs, and endless mud. We begin in the age of Napoleon Bonaparte, a time of grand battles and bold ambition, but also of aching feet, spoiled rations, and frostbitten fingers. This is not the story carved into marble or gilded in gold. This is the story whispered by the tired, the sick, the forgotten. With each passing segment, we'll wander calmly through different chambers of the Napoleonic world, from the lives of soldiers trudging through snow and hunger, to the quiet speculation surrounding a fallen emperor's death, to a mist-covered battlefield long since abandoned, and finally, to the soft flicker of candlelight on polished floors in an empire's ballroom, where luxury whispered, as war screamed. Allow each story to unfold, like the turning of pages slow, deliberate, gentle. Let the steady rhythm of history rock you to sleep. Why it sucked to be a soldier in Napoleon's army. Imagine this. You're 20 years old, or maybe 17. You're not sure anymore. Years have blurred since your name was pulled from the conscription list, scribbled in ink by the mayor, and sent to the Empire. They gave you a wool coat, a flintlock musket, and a pair of worn boots too tight for your feet. Now you march, and march, and march. The road ahead stretches endlessly. Your pack is heavy, your back sore. Mud clings to your trousers. The bread in your satchel is hard, nearly stone. There is no fire tonight, just cold wind over the plains of Prussia or the valleys of Spain. You do not know the name of the village you just passed. You will not remember it. They all blur together, slate rooftops, suspicious glances, closed shutters. Every soldier around you smells of unwashed wool and smoke. Blisters burst in your boots. The drummer boy ahead, perhaps, 12 years old, keeps time with a hollow, tired beat. The officers ride beside you, speaking quietly in tones far above your station. Your orders come in single words. Halt, march, load, fire. There is no glory, not really, just routine. When the battle comes, it is noise. Flashing steel, black powder thick in your mouth. And after, silence again. A ruined field, torn earth, figures lying still in the distance, never rising again. You'll help bury the dead, sometimes your own friends, sometimes strangers. You've forgotten how many, and then you march again. Your daily ration is a mystery. Hard biscuit, salt pork, sometimes nothing. You chew slowly, imagining the flavors of home onions from your mother's garden, broth thick with lentils. Here, there is only chewing and swallowing, and the dryness of salt on your tongue. In the winter campaign, frost hardens your uniform. You sleep sitting upright, musket between your knees, breath curling like smoke into the air. Your fingers turn numb. You lose the feeling in 3 toes. You say nothing, others have lost feet. Still, you march. The camp offers little refuge. Canvas tents barely block the wind. Men huddle like animals, wrapped in shared blankets. Lice creep beneath seams. You scratch in your sleep. When spring comes, the thaw is muddy. The smell returns of rot, of sweat, of wet earth and horse dung. And still, somehow, you survive. Perhaps because you're lucky. Perhaps because you're not one to ask questions. You learn to keep your head down. You obey. You clean your musket. You polish your bayonet. You do not speak when not spoken to. You forget to count the days. Once, a general rode past epaulettes, gleaming, cloak, billowing. He nodded to your regiment. For a moment, you felt seen. Then he passed, and you resumed marching. A fire that holds just long enough to warm your hands. A loaf of bread not yet stale. A girl in a village who gave you water, asked your name, and smiled before you left. But mostly, there is repetition. The rhythm of a soldier's life under Napoleon. Preparation, deprivation, exhaustion. Victory means little. You fight in places you do not understand, for a cause shaped by men you never meet. And when the cannon smoke clears, and you are still alive, you say nothing. Just breathe. Just wait. Tomorrow, you will march again. And so, under layers of wool and weariness, you drift, not into sleep, but into something deeper. That ancient soldier's trance, where time softens and pain becomes a rhythm all its own. You would not have lasted a day, but many did, quietly, faithfully, endlessly. Let us move on. You grow used to the silence between commands. It becomes its own kind of company. The crunch of boots and gravel, the creak of leather straps, the sigh of breath, drawn and held. These sounds form a rhythm. They become your companions as you march through villages, too poor to feed you, past fields where the wheat has long since withered under the wheels of wagons and war. In the evenings, you might gather with your messmates though. That word, mess, often describes the state of things more than the meal. You sit on upturned crates or bare ground, eating slowly, hands wrapped in cloth to shield from cold. Someone hums a tune passed down from a mother, someone else sharpens a knife out of habit. No one talks much about what's ahead. The uncertainty is too large, too heavy to name. Once, you were told you fought for La Gloire, for France, perhaps for the Emperor himself. But now the idea of empire seems distant, as faded as a campaign map left too long in the sun. You do not fight for glory anymore. You fight to survive the day. Your uniform is a patchwork, now part issued, part scavenged. Your greatcoat, once blue, is stained with months of weather. You use twine where buttons are missing. Your hat no longer sits straight. But none of this matters. You are still a soldier. Imagine yourself. Then, at a cross, your regiment halts in the middle of a forked road. The officers arguing quietly under breath. One road leads toward a rumored ambush. The other, toward a flooded crossing. You wait in the chill air, your breath ghosting outward like a fog. You grip your musket tighter, and you realize no choice here is good. It is not strategy you feel. It is resignation. And when the march resumes, whichever way it goes, you do not ask why. You simply lift one foot, then the next, and follow. Later, when sleep comes, it is thin and broken. You lie beneath canvas or stars, chin tucked into your collar, listening to coughing from nearby tents. The ground is hard. Your dreams are fragments of home, of noise, of silence. Sometimes, you hear horses in the distance. The scouts returning, or deserters caught. You roll over and face the other direction. Still, the army keeps moving, and you move with it. You cross bridges that buckle under your weight. You pass burned-out farmhouses, their chimneys standing like gravestones. You see children stare as you pass, holding close to their mothers, their faces quiet and unreadable. And though your name may never appear in any book, though your bones may someday rest far from home, you are part of something enormous and relentless. A living machine, built from thousands of tired, hopeful, hungry men like you. The drums beat again. It's time to go. You sling your pack, and once more, with aching feet and dull eyes, you march into history. The strange death of Napoleon, stomach cancer, or British plot. Now, imagine you are not a soldier, but instead a silent observer in a room shrouded by sea, mist thousands of miles from France. The year is 1821, and the man once called emperor lies in exile. Napoleon Bonaparte, once the master of Europe. Europe now sleeps in a damp house on the remote island of St. Helena, far out in the South Atlantic. The walls are warped with moisture. The wind scratches at the shutters. The garden is overgrown. There are no marble halls or gilded mirrors here. Only wooden floors that creak beneath the weight of memory. He is no longer surrounded by generals, only a small circle of loyal attendants and wary British guards. The days pass slowly, marked by the ticking of a mantel clock and the rustle of turning pages as Napoleon rereads his favorite books. Sir Plutarch, Homer. His health, once vigorous, now fades like a banner left too long in the sun. He complains of stomach pains burning, persistent and gnawing. His appetite dwindles. He grows thin. His mood, too, sours. The once sharp voice is quieter now, sometimes laced with bitterness, sometimes with weary resignation. Doctors come and go, mostly British, carefully watched and just as carefully watching. Diagnoses vary. Treatments are limited. Bleeding callum laudanum, nothing helps. And then, on May 5th, beneath a sky heavy with rain, Napoleon dies. Officially, the cause is stomach cancer. It runs in his family. His father died from it, after all. The autopsy noted a thickened stomach wall, a blackened ulcer signs consistent with the disease, but not everyone believed it. The whispers began almost immediately. Some claimed he had been slowly poisoned by the British. Perhaps others said it was his own staff, fearing the burden of an aging exile. There were questions about arsenic, found decades later in strands of his hair, preserved in keepsake. Was it deliberate? Was it accidental? Was it simply the wallpaper? Only layers of questions, like fog rolling in from the sea. Napoleon had once ruled with fire and thunder. He reshaped borders, toppled monarchies, and crowned himself emperor beneath the golden dome of But here, in a bedroom with faded curtains and the persistent scent of mildew, his story ended with a whimper. He asked for violets before he died. He remembered the Empress Josephine. He spoke, near the end, of France. The army. And a name, it was never clear who or what. Memory fades in dying minds. His body was buried under a plain stone, in a shallow valley, not far from the sea. A willow tree marked the spot. The British would not allow the name Napoleon on the Macaroni General. A reminder that even legends can be reduced by politics. But that was not the end. Years later, in 1840, his remains were returned to France, in a grand procession lit by torches and lined with mourners. His tomb now rests beneath the golden dome of Les Invalides in Paris lavish Imperial, and silent. Still, the mystery lingers. Was it cancer, or a slow, bitter plot, or simply the culmination of a body worn down by conquest, betrayal, and exile? We do not know, but in the quiet of that damp house, on an island so far from home, the last breath of an empire was exhaled, and history gently turned the page. After his death, the silence of St. Helena deepened. His attendants lingered for a time recording, remembering, preserving. His physician, Francesco Antamarchi, performed the autopsy and took careful notes. He noted the thickened folds of the stomach, the dark lesions, the strange corrosion of the lining. T was cancer, he believed, perhaps an ulcer that had festered for too long. Yet he also admitted to contradictions, things that didn't fully fit. Even then, in that quiet, humid room, uncertainty was already settling in. Decades later, fragments of Napoleon's hair clipped by loyal attendants as mementos would be tested and retested. Arsenic, elevated levels, enough, some claimed, to suggest deliberate poisoning. But arsenic was common then in dyes, medicines, cosmetics, and even wallpaper. The wallpaper theory emerged in the 20th century. The damp climate of St. Helena may have encouraged a type of mold that caused the arsenic-laced wallpaper to release toxic vapors. The theory is plausible. Quiet, slow, undramatic, a kind of poison you might not even realize was killing you. But other theories clung tighter to intrigue. Some believed the British, who kept Napoleon under tight control, might have wanted a final, quiet solution to their imperial prisoner. He was a symbol, even in defeat. An idea, a risk, best removed. Others turned their suspicions toward Count de Montholon, one of Napoleon's few companions in exile. It was said he handled the emperor's wine and medicines. He had debts, he had motives, he inherited wealth after Napoleon's death. But no proof, only shadows. And so, the debate continued not with shouts, but with murmured study, soft turning pages, and forensic whispers. And yet perhaps the most poignant aspect of Napoleon's death is not how it happened. St. Helena was not a cruel prison, but it was a slow one. No escape, no noise, no applause, only the sea, the wind, and the slow ticking of a man's decline. Napoleon spent his days dictating his memoirs, walking the garden path in worn boots, and staring at the horizon. He was deeply aware of how history would remember him. He once said, "What a novel my life has been." Even in defeat, he worked to shape the version of himself that posterity would know not as a failed conqueror, but as a visionary, exiled by fearful. He received few letters. The books he read became companions. His favorite was the Iliad, the tale of another warrior whose fate was sealed by ambition and pride. Sometimes he quoted Homer aloud. Sometimes he simply stared into the middle distance. The staff at Longwood House grew used to his routines. They noticed when he no longer walked as far, when he stopped correcting drafts, when his voice grew faint, his legendary energy was gone. Even his famously sharp mind began to drift. Toward the end, his thoughts returned to the past. To Marengo, to Austerlitz, to Josephine, to the coronation. He asked for a keepsake of his son. He murmured about France. Some say his last words were, "France, the army, the head of the army, Josephine." Others say he simply sighed and passed quietly in his sleep. No trumpets, no only stillness. The end of Napoleon Bonaparte was not one of gunpowder and glory, but of shadows, silence, and the long, slow unraveling of memory. He was buried beneath a willow. His tomb bore no name. The man who had once crowned himself stood alone in death. Yet in time, even his body was exhumed and returned to France, received with reverence. His legacy his life became a matter of perspective. To some, he remains a tyrant. To others, a genius. To most, a figure of fascination. But on St. Helena, it was just a man aging ill and deeply human whose time had simply run out. As we leave this quiet place, the candle flickers low, the island fades. The sea laps gently against the shore, and history continues. Imagine, now, that the sun has barely risen. The morning is cold. The ground is slick with hoarfrost. The grass stiff and silver. It is December 2nd, 1805. The rolling plains near the town of in what is now the Czech Republic are about to witness one of the most calculated battles in military history. But tonight, we don't follow the cannons. We walk the land long after the fighting has ended. The battlefield is quiet, now so still that even the wind seems reluctant to disturb it. The snow has returned, gently covering the torn earth. What once echoed with musket fire and desperate commands now lies in silence, interrupted only by the occasional caw of a raven. In the hours after the battle, the land was thick with smoke and heat. Fires smoldered where hay carts had burned. The ice on the lakes had cracked under cannon fire, and thousands of men, French, Austrian, Russian, lay still. Some found peace in death, others did not. It is here, amid the hills and the frozen pools, that secrets would remain bare not because they were deliberately hidden, but because they were simply forgotten. Historians often revisit Austerlitz for its strategy, Napoleon's feigned weakness, his deliberate positioning, his luring of the enemy into a trap. But the landscape itself holds another kind of memory, less glorious, more grounded. In the years that followed, the villagers of nearby towns began to report strange things uncovered in the soil. bits of uniform buttons, rusted sabers, bone fragments, tangled in roots. A wheel from a French artillery caisson was found embedded deep beneath a barn floor. The corner of a battered knapsack, the initials barely visible, surfaced after a spring thaw. The lakes, too, whispered of what they had seen. One of the most enduring legends of Austerlitz is of the frozen ponds that cracked beneath fleeing Russian soldiers. Contemporary accounts speak of artillery fire shattering the ice. Men and horses plunged into the freezing depths. Whether dozens drowned or hundreds, no one can say with certainty. Later, when the ice melted, farmers recalled the unnatural quiet, the smooth surface, hiding what lay beneath. Modern archaeological scans have found traces, shifts in soil density, faint outlines of trench lines, disruptions near the old lakeshore. But nature has softened the scars. Grass grows tall again. Trees cast long shadows. Only careful study and quiet wandering can reveal what remains. There are personal echoes here, to if you listen. Napoleon had ordered that the wounded be cared for, but resources were thin. Field hospitals were overwhelmed. Some wounded were left where they fell. Others were buried hastily in shallow pits. French engineers marked the battlefield with wooden crosses, but weather and time erased them. Letters from survivors, those who had limped away, described the ghostliness of the aftermath. One young grenadier wrote of returning to the field days later, looking for a friend who'd been wounded. He found nothing, just scattered gear and silence. He never knew what became of him. And then there's the story of the candlemaker's apprentice from Brno, who came to the field a week later to collect metal for reused buckles, musket balls, bits of iron. He said the wind made strange sounds through the broken branches. Some said he never spoke the same way again. Of course, not all stories can be confirmed. Some are likely embellished, but in the stillness of places like Austerlitz, such whispers linger. They are not loud. They do not demand belief. They merely settle softly into the folds of history. As time passed, the land healed. Grass returned. Crops were planted. Roads were built, but the soil kept its memories. In the 20th century, during road expansion, workers uncovered a mass grave near Pratzen Heights. Remains of young men, their bones still bearing traces of uniforms. They were reburied with care, but their names were unknown. There is a museum near the site now. Visitors come to learn about formations, maps, strategy. But step outside, walk along the edge of the fields, and the atmosphere changes. There is no sound but birdsong and wind. No markers, just space, quiet, earth that remembers more than it says. And so, as we leave this place, this quiet field with its buried past, we carry with us the truth that not all of history is written. Some of it simply waits, waiting in soil, in shadows, in silence. You walk slowly along the gently sloping rise of Pratzen Heights, where the decisive blow fell during the Battle of Austerlitz. Today, it's covered in soft grass, dotted with wildflowers in the summer, and coated in snow during the colder months. But on that December morning in 1805, it was choked with the movements of thousands of soldiers. The boots of French infantry, scrambling upward, musket barrels glinting in the pale light. Imagine standing there after the battle has ended. The smoke has drifted away. The shouting, the cries, the clash of steel all gone. What's left is eerily still. The battlefield, now quiet, is transformed into a place of muted echoes. The trees along the ridges seem to lean in closer. The wind carries only the faintest scent of black powder, like a memory barely held in the air. In the days that followed Napoleon's victory, soldiers, those who survived, walked among the fallen. They searched for comrades. They collected gear, rifles, drums, boots. Scavengers came next. Local farmers and townspeople crept cautiously into the open field, harvesting what they could. Pieces of cloth, brass buttons, belt buckles. Some brought wagons, others sacks. They picked through the remnants of glory, but even in this aftermath, care was taken by some. French surgeons, though exhausted, attempted to treat the wounded where they could. A small field hospital was set up in a nearby chapel, the pews used as beds, the altar transformed into a table for surgery. They had little linen rags, buckets of water, and the prayers of the dying. A priest in a nearby village recorded in his journal. They came wrapped in cloaks, carried on doors, their eyes wide open, seeing nothing. I lit candles for each of them. I do not know all their names. That priest, like many villagers, spent days walking the perimeter of the battlefield, offering final blessings and quiet prayers in Latin over those who could not speak for themselves. Over the decades, the story of Austerlitz became polished, reduced to a tactical masterpiece in the history books. But the land beneath remained unchanged in its memory. Children played where cavalry once charged. Shepherds guided flocks through valleys where cannons once boomed. In the 1800s, romantic artists painted Austerlitz as a noble scene. Napoleon, lit from above, his men marching with resolve. But in reality, the men were cold, often hungry, many poorly shod. Their uniforms, beautiful on parade, grew ragged on campaign. Boots wore thin. Woolen coats were infested with lice. Marching was not elegant. It was grueling. Blisters, frostbite, fatigue, and after battle, the wounded left behind weren't carried home. Most were buried close to where they fell hastily. In years to come, plows would strike skulls. Bones were quietly reburied, often without ceremony. In 1896, a French officer on a commemorative visit wrote of standing atop the hill and watching the fog roll in. It came silently and settled across the ground. I thought of Arm and how they too must have disappeared into it, swallowed by the morning mist, never to return. Even in the modern day, metal detectors near Austerlitz click faintly with forgotten debris. A bent bayonet, a tarnished coin, a lead musket ball pressed deep into the soil. Each one a whisper, each one a trace of the thousands who marched, fought, and fell. The battlefield at Austerlitz is not only a place of strategy, a place of residue, quiet residue, of lives passed, quickly, remembered slowly. So we leave it now not as a triumph or a loss, but as a place where human struggle became part of the land, part of the wind, part of the stillness, and from here, we drift gently into another world, another side of this same story. Inside the warm, glowing interiors of empire, inside the ballroom of the French Empire, the fire is low now. The wind outside is gentle, and in your mind's eye, you walk toward a grand chateau. Candles flicker behind tall windows, the gates swing open without resistance. You enter slowly. Your feet no longer sink into mud, but glide across polished marble. You are inside the ballroom of the French Empire. Here, the world feels impossibly distant from the trenches and fields you've left behind. The air carries the scent of beeswax and violets. Silk curtains ripple slightly from a breeze. Above, dozens perhaps, hundreds of candles glow in chandeliers made of crystal and gilded bronze. Their light softened by glass drops that shimmer like dew. The music has begun. Imagine yourself standing along the edge of the hall. You see women in empire-waisted gowns, gliding like figures from a dream. Men in military, dress coats, epaulets gleaming, whisper polite words as they bow and spin. There is laughter, but soft and measured. Voices are low, trained in the art of elegance. It is not simply a dance, it is performance, ritual, politics in motion. Each curtsy, each glance, each pairing is loaded with meaning. A nobleman's invitation to waltz may secure favor. A duchess's smile might open doors. The musicians hired from the conservatoire perhaps play not too loudly, never too fast. Their violins sing beneath the murmurs, providing rhythm without command. Time seems to stretch here, unhurried, elegant, distant from the marching of armies or the cries of the poor. Servants move in the shadows. Gloved hands refill crystal glasses with wine, though never to excess. Platters of delicate pastries and chilled fruit circulate slowly. No one eats quickly. There is time. There is always time in places like this. You might notice, tucked into a corner near the musicians, a small group of officers. They speak quietly of Austerlitz or Spain or the uncertain tension with Russia. But even here, their war stories are softened, smoothed out by protocol and formality. They speak as if narrating a play rather than recalling the dead. Their uniforms remain pressed. The medals across their chests gleam under candlelight. A woman seated nearby fans herself. Her smile never falters, but her eyes rest for a moment too long on a window, the one that looks out onto the gardens. Perhaps she once received a letter, black-sealed, informing her that her brother would not be coming home from Prussia. Or perhaps she simply does not like to dance. As you wander deeper into this world, you notice the silence behind the music, the way everyone seems to know precisely where to look, when to laugh, how to glide. It is beautiful. It is exhausting. It is a world of appearance, of calculation. The empire may be young, but already its rituals are ancient. Beyond the ballroom, down polished corridors, and past mirrored salons, Napoleon himself once walked. His boots were worn from travel, but here, in these halls, they were shined. He attended these gatherings with calculation, rarely with joy. Those closest to him, ministers, diplomats, marshals, understood that every invitation, every seating arrangement, every bouquet of flowers held meaning. Power was never spoken aloud in the ballroom, but it was everywhere. And outside, always outside, the soldiers still marched. As the music softens, you feel the night deepen. The candles burn low. The dancers begin to take their final turns. Some slip away into salons for conversation. Others move toward their carriages. The night air crisp against silks and velvet. You linger for just a moment longer. The chandeliers above, seemly stars now glimmering, suspended in perfect stillness. And then, ... you turn from the hall. You return slowly to your quiet room. To now, to the present. The world of candlelight and conquest fades into shadow, but it lingers. Just a little. As you watch the dancers move beneath the chandeliers, you may begin to notice that not all movements are effortless. The grace is practiced. The conversation, rehearsed. Many of these guests have been raised since childhood to behave precisely this way. To hold a glass in silence, to nod at the right joke, to never, under any circumstance, betray discomfort. In the corner, a young nobleman shifts his weight from foot to foot. His uniform is immaculate. his gloves bleached white, but his brow carries the faintest trace of anxiety. He is not yet 80 and already has been promised a post in Napoleon's Grande. He sips wine quietly, eyes on the floor. He will leave for the front in the spring. Across the room, a woman older than most guests wears a sapphire brooch. Her gown is finely made, but the style is slightly out of date. She once held a higher place in court, perhaps, under Now she smiles as others pass her, her fingers twisting the ribbon of her fan. She does not dance tonight. These are the quiet shadows behind the light. Imagine the silence of a palace corridor just beyond the music. A single candle burns on a polished sideboard. The air carries the scent of old perfume floral. Powdered, fading, you hear the faint echo of a harpsichord, the brush of slippers on tile, and then ... Nothing. Many of these palaces, years later, would be emptied. Some seized, others forgotten. Their ballrooms would fall dark. Chandeliers lowered, mirrors covered. The music would stop. But tonight here, in this moment, everything still shines. The empire itself exists in this same delicate state. It appears immortal. Its generals are victorious. Its emperor commands the loyalty of millions. Its fashion, its architecture, its ideals all seem destined to define an era. And yet, beneath the gold leaf and grandeur, time is moving. Napoleon's conquests stretch too far. His allies fray, his enemies regroup, and the people, those not in this ballroom, but marching through snow, starving in blockaded cities, toiling in fields, growing weary. But inside this ballroom, you are suspended in the stillness before the storm. The floor glows from candlelight reflected in polished parquet. A violin soul drifts gently over the hum of conversation. The empire, for one last moment, breathes in perfect rhythm. A servant clears an empty glass. A woman gathers her gloves. The harpist yawns behind his music stand. Time slows, then stills, and you, an invisible observer, turn once more, toward the present. The doors behind you close with a soft click. The music fades entirely, and all is quiet again. Conclusion now. Gently, we return from the world of polished boots and weary feet, from silken gloves and frostbitten hands. You've walked beside soldiers through mud and cannon smoke. You've stood among conspirators in candlelit rooms, listened to rumors whispering around Napoleon's last breath. You've wandered the empty fields of Austerlitz and gazed at flickering chandeliers and golden halls where dreams once danced. And yet, despite the pageantry, despite the legends, it becomes clear. For many who lived then, glory was a distant illusion. The reality of empire, like so many great moments in history, was not one thing, but many, a tapestry of aching bones and iron discipline, of whispered ambition and silent fear, of endless marching to little bread and nights that felt colder than the snow itself. But now, as the march ends and the torches burn low, you rest in a different time. The fire has faded from the battlefields. The ballroom is empty once more. The empire has passed into history, and with it, the clatter of sabers and spinning waltzes. All that remains is stillness, softness, memory. So take a breath, slow, and even let it out gently. You have wandered through 2 hours of distant lives, and now it is time to let them go. There is no conscription here, no frostbitten boots, no heavy pack on your shoulders. Just the warmth of your bed, the hush of a quiet room, and the comfort of knowing that while history marches ever forward, tonight you do not have to sleep now. The past will wait. You've done enough.